Picture a country getting a divorce from a drink, not a quiet separation, a violent one. Now fill it with hatchets swinging on a December night, 90,000 pounds of ruined leaves heaped so high in a freezing harbour that they rise above the water like haystacks. Add soldiers grinding coffee beans in tin cups with the butts of their rifles between cannonades, a president's name stamped onto an advertising slogan he may never have said, and a navy that took away its sailors' wine and left them nothing to hold at night but a hot tin mug. That's America and tea. The most loyal tea colonies England ever had. The most devoted tea drinkers outside of China. People who owned more teapots per household than some of them owned chairs. A place where you could sip smuggled Dutch bohea from Chinese porcelain in the morning and swear a public oath against the same leaf by candlelight that evening. We're going back there tonight. Not as tourists looking at powdered wigs and harbour postcards. We're living it. And tonight is a little different from our usual single day in a single life, because tonight's question refuses to stay inside one day. Tonight we're following one question across 170 years. Why does America drink coffee? Why does a nation founded by tea drinkers, planted by an empire that ran on tea, wake up every morning to the smell of a bean from Arabia by way of Brazil? The title of tonight's story says a war had something to do with it. I'll be honest with you before we start, because that's the deal on this channel. The title is the polite version. It wasn't a war, it was three. 3 wars, each one pouring the cup a little fuller, and by the end of tonight you'll know all 3 by name. You'll know why the first one lit the fire, and why the other 2 kept feeding it until the fire stopped being a rebellion and became something much more permanent. Breakfast. One more thing before we go, and I want to say it plainly. The dates in this story are real. The prices are real. The ships, the laws, the rations, the letters. Real. And where a story is only a legend, I'll tell you it's a legend, because that's the difference between history and a bedtime lie. But the eyes I'm going to lend you tonight, the servant girl in Boston, the grocer's boy in New York, the soldier in Maryland, the cook's louse on a Texas cattle trail, those are borrowed eyes, composites, stitched together from diaries and ledgers and letters of 100 real people, whose names history mostly didn't bother to keep. The rooms are real, the eyes are borrowed. I will always tell you which is which. So, I make these history stories, and honestly, I've given up trying to figure out whether anyone actually sleeps to them, or whether you're all just weirdos who find it soothing to picture 90,000 pounds of tea rotting in a winter harbour, while men in blankets and lamp black pretend nobody knows exactly who they are. Either way, subscribe if you want, get comfortable. Here we go. It starts with a kettle. Before the hatchets, before the harbour, before any of it, a copper kettle, coming to the boil in the kitchen of a tall wooden house on Hanover Street in the north end of Boston, and you are the one watching it because that is your job, and if the water boils too long the master's wife will say the tea tastes flat, and if it boils too little she will say it tastes raw, and either way it will somehow be your fault. Your name doesn't survive in any record, so tonight we'll say you're called only what the household calls you. Girl. You're 14 years old. You were bound into this house 2 years ago, when your father's farm in Braintree failed, and your mother, standing in the doorway with your bundle already packed, told you that service in a good Boston house was better than hunger in a bad Braintree one. She wasn't wrong. She also didn't look at you when she said it. It is October of 1771. It is not yet 6 in the morning, and the kitchen is the only warm room in the house. You know this because you slept in it. Your pallet is a sack of straw behind the door, close enough to the banked fire that you wake up smelling of wood smoke, far enough that by dawn your feet are numb inside your stockings. You've already been up for half an hour, you've raked the coals, fed them kindling, hauled the day's first water from the pump in the yard. 2 trips, the bucket handle biting the same groove into your palm it bites every morning. And now you stand watching the kettle, flexing your cold fingers, listening to the house wake up above you. And here's the thing you need to understand about this house, this street, this whole city, before anything else in tonight's story will make sense. Everything above your head runs on tea, and when I say runs on tea, I need you to understand what that means in 1771, because it doesn't mean what it means now. This isn't a beverage. This is a schedule, a religion, a filing system for the entire social order. Tea in the morning when the master reads his newspaper, tea in the afternoon when the mistress receives, and receiving is a verb with teeth in this town. Receiving decides who is somebody and who is nobody. Tea after supper, if there's company. The women of Boston drink tea the way the town's churches ring bells, on the hour, in public, as a declaration. By the 1770s, the American colonies are drinking somewhere between 500,000 and well over £1 million of tea a year. Nobody can count it exactly, and the reason nobody can count it is part of tonight's story. Philadelphia drinks it. New York drinks it. Charleston drinks it. Boston, this cold, crooked, pious town of 15 or 16,000 people, drinks it morning and afternoon in houses rich and poor. There are colonial households that own no fork that matches another fork but own a teapot. Historians going through probate inventories, the lists of what people owned when they died, keep finding it. A labourer's widow with 1 bed, 1 pot, 1 Bible, and a tea service. Upstairs, in the parlour you will scrub but never sit in, stands the proof of everything I just said. The tea table, round mahogany, on a pillar and claw base, tipped up against the wall when not in use like an altar waiting for its hour. On the shelf beside it, the equipage, and yes, that's the real word, equipage, the same word used for a gentleman's coach and horses, which tells you exactly how seriously this is taken. The silver teapot with the family's initials engraved on the belly, the sugar tongs shaped like a bird's claw, the slop bowl, the strainer, the little chest with the lock on it. Hold on to that little chest, we'll come back to it. And the cups. 12 of them, blue and white, thin as eggshell, painted with a Chinese river scene. A bridge, a fisherman, a bird. Porcelain that travelled from a kiln in Jingdezhen down the Yangtze to Canton, around the Cape of Good Hope to London, and across the Atlantic to Boston. Farther than any person in this house has ever travelled or ever will. The mistress inherited them from her grandmother. When one of the 12 got a hairline crack across the fisherman, before your time, though you've heard about it so often it might as well have been your fault too, the mistress wept, actually wept, and the cracked cup was not thrown away. It sits at the back of the shelf, turned so the crack faces the wall. Remember the cracked cup. Of everything in this house, remember that. The kettle starts to rumble. You wrap your hand in your apron, lift it off the crane, and begin the climb. Kitchen to hall, hall to stairs, stairs to parlour, 31 steps you've counted, carrying a full kettle of boiling water with your arm held stiff and away, so that when it slops, it always slops. It scalds the floorboards and not you. Your right forearm carries 3 old burn scars, pale and smooth, like little fish. Every serving girl in Boston has them. It's how you'd recognise each other, if anybody ever looked at serving girls' arms. In the parlour, the mistress is already seated, and now you get to watch the ceremony you've watched 1,000 times and will never once be part of. She unlocks the tea chest. She keeps the key on a ribbon at her waist, next to the keys for the wine and the sugar. And think about that for a second. Think about what it means that in this house, dried leaves are locked up with the silver. Tea is worth locking. Good bohea. That's the everyday black tea, say it boo. He, everyone here does. Runs 2 to 3 shillings a pound in the shops, and the fancy greens, the Hysons, can run double that and more. And a shilling matters in a town where a labouring man might see 2 of them for a long day's work. She measures the leaves with the silver caddy spoon, not a kitchen spoon. Level, exact, the way her mother measured, and her mother's mother. She warms the pot. She pours. She watches the leaves unfurl with the expression other people say for church, and the smell fills the room. You know it better than you know any smell in the world except wood smoke. Dark, malty, a little like raisins, a little like the inside of a wooden box, with something underneath it that you have no word for because the word is China and you don't know it. That smell means morning. That smell means order. That smell means everything is where it should be. The king on his throne, the master at his newspaper, the mistress at her table, and you by the door with the empty kettle, invisible, waiting to be needed. You will live long enough to watch that smell become an accusation, but not yet. The master takes his cup standing, drains it in 3 swallows while scanning the Boston Gazette, and is gone to his counting house by 7. He's a merchant, dry goods, salt fish out, English cloth and hardware in. A middling man in a town of middling men, forever £10 from prosperity and 40 from ruin. The mistress sits longer. The mistress's tea table, this morning hour and its grander afternoon sister, is the only parliament she will ever be allowed to sit in, so she runs it like one. And you? You get yours in the kitchen, and this is the part I want you to feel, because tonight's whole story lives inside this one small humiliation. You drink tea too. Everyone in Boston drinks tea, down to the almshouse, down to the wharves. But the leaves that come down to the kitchen have already been steeped once upstairs, sometimes twice, and cook steeps them a 3rd time in the old brown pot with the chipped spout, and what comes out is the colour of rainwater off a shingle roof and tastes like hot nothing with a memory of raisins. You drink it from a cracked white bowl with no handle, standing up, because sitting is for when the day's done, and the day is never done. Sweetened, on good days, with the scrapings of the sugar loaf, the dust and corners, the part that's more string and paper than sugar. Same leaf, same water. The distance between the parlour and the kitchen is 31 steps, and the tea makes the whole journey down the staircase of rank, weakening at every step, and everybody in this house drinks exactly the strength of their station. That's the empire, girl. In a cup. You just don't know it yet. Cook knows it. Cook is 50-some, wide as the hearth, with forearms that could stun an ox and a dead husband somewhere at the bottom of the Grand Banks. She watches you make a face at the 3rd brew tea one morning and laughs. Not kindly, not unkindly. Drink it, she says. That's the taste of knowing your place. A pause. The fire ticks. Learn it now. It goes down easier young. You drink it. It's warm at least. In a Boston October, warm is most of what matters. But warm, it turns out, is not the whole of what's in the cup. And to show you what else is in there, I have to take you down to the water, because the next thing you need to understand about Boston tea is where it actually comes from, and where it's supposed to come from, which is not the same thing at all. This town is about to teach you the difference, and then it's going to teach the whole world. By law, English law, written 3,000 miles away by men who will never smell this harbour, every leaf of tea drunk in these colonies is supposed to arrive one way and one way only. Grown in China, sold at Canton, carried to London in the ships of the East India Company, auctioned in London, taxed in London, and only then shipped west by licensed merchants. The company holds the monopoly. The system exists so that every cup you pour upstairs pays its toll to the men who own the company, and the company, by the 1770s, practically owns chunks of the government that writes the law. Tidy, closed, profitable, and almost nobody in the colonies fully obeys it. Because there is another way for tea to arrive, and it comes at night. You find out about it in November, because cook shakes you awake in the black hours, a hand on your shoulder, hard, no gentleness in it, and the kitchen is cold, which tells you it's long past midnight, and there's a lantern burning with its shutter half closed, which tells you whatever is happening is not supposed to be seen. Up, say nothing, carry what I hand you. There's a cart in the yard with its wheels wrapped in sacking. That detail reaches you before anything else. Wheels wrapped in cloth so they make no sound on the cobbles. And your stomach drops because silent wheels mean the same thing in every century. Two men you've never seen unload small chests, half chests, canvas wrapped, and pass them through the cellar window, and you stack them behind the winter apples where cook points, and nobody says one word louder than a breath. The chests are heavier than they look. When you take the first one, your arms dip and the corner catches your hip bone, and you clamp your teeth on the sound you almost make. And here's a strange, specific thing about those chests, a thing your fingers notice in the dark. Under the canvas, under the wooden boards, the lining is metal. Soft, dull sheets of it, folded at the corners like paper. Lead, or something near it. Tea crosses two oceans to get here, and seawater and tea are enemies, so every chest of it that travels is a wooden box around a metal box around a smell. You'll meet that metal lining again in 2 years at the edge of the water under a hatchet. File it away. The men drink a glass in the kitchen before they go. Nobody introduces anybody, but you hear one of them say to cook, low through the door, the word Holland, and later the words no duty, and a soft laugh from both of them, the laugh of men who have done a thing many times and expect to do it many more. Dutch tea, smuggled tea, the same leaf from the same Chinese hills, but it sailed to Amsterdam instead of London, and from Amsterdam to some quiet cove or cooperative wharf in Rhode Island or Long Island, or right here under Boston's own nose, and it never paid the king a farthing. Nobody knows exactly how much of the tea drunk in these colonies is smuggled. That's the point of smuggling. But the guesses run high. Some say half, some say 3/4 and more, especially in New York and Philadelphia, where the legal stuff can barely be given away. Boston, believe it or not, is one of the more law-abiding tea towns. Plenty of company tea lands here. And even Boston has cellars like yours. In the morning the mistress's tea chest has been refilled. She locks it with the same little key, measures with the same silver spoon, presides with the same churchly calm. Whether the leaves in it this month bowed to the king on their way here, she does not ask. Almost nobody asks. The wickedness of it, if it is wickedness, is so ordinary that it has stopped feeling like anything at all. Remember that too. In 1771, breaking the tea law is normal. Ordinary, housewife-grade crime. What nobody upstairs suspects, not the mistress with her key, not the master with his gazette, is that within 2 years the drinking of tea itself, legal or smuggled, will become the crime. Not in any court. in something harsher, in the street's opinion. But before we get there, you have one more discovery to make, and it happens on an errand, and it's the most important small moment of your small unrecorded life, so let's walk it slowly. A raw grey afternoon, late November, the mistress has a headache and sends you to the apothecary on Cornhill for her powders. You go the long way, because the long way runs down to the water, and you are 14, and the water is the only thing in Boston that never looks the same twice. Boston smells of the sea the way other towns smell of their middens, salt and tar and fish guts and wet rope and the low tide stink of the flats. That sulphurous mud and shellfish breath the harbour exhales twice a day when the water pulls back. You'll smell it again on a December night worth remembering, so take a good pull of it now. Tar, salt, mud, hemp. The wharves bristle with masts. Long Wharf runs a third of a mile straight out into the harbour, so far that big ships tie up at its end without lightering, and along its spine stand warehouses stuffed with everything the empire moves. This town of 16,000 talks to Jamaica, to Lisbon, to London, to the coast of Africa. Every child on these streets can read a ship's rig the way you read a face. And on the way back up from the water, passing the door of a tavern near the town dock, you stop. Because of a smell you don't know. Dark, burnt, but good burnt. Burnt on purpose. Bitter and brown and somehow dry. A smell with edges. Nothing like the soft raisin breath of the parlour upstairs. It catches at the back of your nose and makes your mouth water, and you stand there in the cold like a fool with your basket sniffing at a doorway. The sign over the door says it is a coffee house. You've heard the word. There are a handful of coffee houses in Boston. The British Coffee House on King Street, favoured by officers and crown men, and others where the merchants gather, and grander ones in the other towns, and in London, you've heard, hundreds. But listen to what a coffee house actually is in these colonies, because it isn't mostly a place for drinking coffee. It's a place for news. Men go there to read papers, post notices, auction cargoes, argue politics, sell insurance on ships and sometimes the ships themselves. Half of what they drink in a colonial coffee house is wine, punch, chocolate, even, yes, tea. The coffee is almost beside the point. The bean is known here, has been for a century. The apothecaries sell it green as a sort of medicine, and some households roast a handful for a treat. But coffee in 1771, America is a public drink, a masculine drink, an occasional drink. Tea is the queen of the home. Coffee is a rumour with a wonderful smell. The door swings open, a red-faced man comes out, and the smell rolls over you whole. Roasted beans, pipe smoke, wet wool, newsprint. Voices inside, loud, layered, arguing. And this too is part of the smell somehow. Argument. Men leaning over a table jabbing fingers at a newspaper. You stand there maybe 10 seconds. Then the wind comes off the water and shoves you on up the hill, and you fetch the powders and you forget the whole thing. Except you don't. Your nose doesn't. Noses never do. 60 years from now, an old woman in a young country, you will stand in your own kitchen grinding roasted beans in a little iron mill screwed to the table edge, and that doorway on a grey afternoon will come back to you entire. The smell got in early. It always gets in early. That's another gun laid quietly on tonight's table. A girl who loves a smell she's never tasted. Keep count. There will be more. Now. The afternoons. If the morning tea is a private mass, the afternoon tea table is high court, and through that winter and into 1772, you serve at it twice a week, which means you stand at the wall for 2 hours holding a hot kettle wrapped in a cloth, refilling on signal, seen by no one, hearing everything. You learn that tea has a grammar, and the grammar is merciless. A guest turns her cup over on the saucer, or lays her spoon across it. That means no more, thank you. And a hostess who pours anyway has blundered. A guest who fails to praise the leaves has insulted the house. There are ladies at that table balancing cup, saucer, and a lump of sugar with the concentration of riggers, walking a yard in a gale. Because to rattle a cup is to be talked about on 3 streets by Thursday. The mistress once told her sister, "You were at the wall, you're always at the wall," that she could place any woman in Boston within half a minute of watching her hold a teacup. She said it the way the master talks about assaying silver, and the talk over the cups that winter has begun to change key, because, and here is where the kindling starts to smell of smoke, the tea in those cups has been political for years already, and everyone at that table knows it, the way you can know a thing and keep it out of your voice. Let me lay the sticks in order quickly, the way the master's newspaper would if the master's newspaper were honest. In 1767, Parliament passed what everyone calls the Townshend Acts, duties on glass, lead, paint, paper, and tea coming into the colonies, not to regulate trade, to raise revenue, to pay crown salaries, which meant the point of it was precisely the thing the colonies denied Parliament could do: tax them without asking them. The reply was a boycott. Non-importation, the merchants called it. The colonies swore off British goods, and Boston swore loudest, and for a while tea itself grew quietly shameful. Ladies pledged their honour to drink none. Pamphlets called the leaf a slow poison, and some households made a show of locking the tea chest and leaving it locked. Then in 1770 Parliament blinked. Mostly. It repealed every Townshend duty except one. It kept the tea duty. 3p on the pound. Not for the money. And this is the detail that will matter for 200 years, so hear it. They kept the 3p on principle, to preserve the right of taxing. 3 pennies left on the table like a coin balanced on a powder keg, purely to prove they were allowed to put it there, and the colonies, tired, wanting their comforts back, mostly went back to drinking. The boycott sagged. The tea came in again, legal and smuggled both, and the mistress's afternoons refilled with porcelain and appraisal, and you went back to your wall with your wrapped kettle. But something had shifted, and standing at the wall you can hear it. It's in the pauses. A lady lifts her cup now and says, lightly, too lightly, "Dutch, I hope." And the table laughs, and the laugh has a wire in it. The master's brother, a lean man with ink-stained cuffs who reads too many pamphlets, holds his cup untasted one evening and says, not lightly at all, 3p is not the price. 3p is the collar. They care nothing for the pence. They care that we wear it. Silence. A log settles in the grate. The mistress pours, and the sound of tea falling into porcelain is suddenly the loudest thing in the room. "Sugar," she says, "for those who take it." And the room gratefully resumes being a parlour. You stand at the wall with your kettle, 14 going on 15, arms aching, and you feel it without having a word for it. The most domestic object in the world has begun to hum. The cup on the table has picked sides before the people holding it have. Every sip in this town is slowly becoming a sentence, "I submit," and every refusal a different sentence, "I do not," and nobody has voted, nobody has marched, nothing has happened yet except 3 pennies and a principle. It will take one more law to strike the spark. It's coming. It's already being argued about in London this winter. in rooms full of men worried about a company too big to fail. Because 3,000 miles east of your kitchen, in counting houses on Leadenhall Street, the East India Company is drowning. Glutted warehouses, some £17 million of unsold tea, debts the size of a small war, a share price through the floor, and the men who own it are about to reach for the oldest bad idea in commerce. Dump the surplus on the colonies, cheap monopoly style, and let the threepence ride along quietly inside the bargain. Cheap tea. That's the plan. Remember, when you hear what Boston does about it, that the tea in those ships was cheap. This was never about the price. Drink it, Cook said. That's the taste of knowing your place. Boston is about 2 years from spitting it out. The law comes in the spring of 1773 and it's called, with perfect flatness, the Tea Act, May the 10th. Parliament passes it the way you'd pass a housekeeping bill, barely a debate. Because on paper it's a rescue, not provocation. The East India Company may now ship its tea directly to America, skipping the London middlemen, selling through its own chosen consignees, cheaper than ever before. Cheaper, in fact, than the smuggler's Dutch tea. The threepence duty stays, but who's counting? The mathematics are supposed to end the argument. Good Bohea, which the smuggler sells you at, say 3 shillings. The company will now land at 2 and something, pay the hated threepence and still keep pennies in your pocket on every pound. Multiply those pennies across a household's year, across a colony's million-odd pounds of tea, and Parliament is genuinely offering America a small fortune in savings. And when I say America explodes, I need you to understand why. Because this is the hinge of the whole night. It isn't the price. The price went down. It's what the price is for. Cheap legal tea means everyone buys legal tea. Everyone buying legal tea means everyone pays the threepence. Everyone paying the threepence means the principle is settled forever. Parliament taxes America quietly, pleasantly, at a discount. The bargain is the trap. The colonists look at the sweetest deal the empire ever offered them and see a collar lined with velvet. And the smugglers, whose entire business dies the day cheap company tea lands, discover conveniently that they too are men of principle, real conviction and threatened profit link arms, the way they do in every century, and out of that alliance comes a decision. The tea must not land. The tea must not be bought. That would be a boycott, and boycotts leak. The tea must not touch the ground. Because there's a legal clockwork here and Boston knows it by heart. Once a cargo enters the harbour, the duty must be paid within 20 days, or the customs men may seize the cargo and land it themselves. Landed is taxed. Taxed is lost. So in Philadelphia and New York, the consignees resign in terror and the tea ships turn around. In Charleston, the tea lands and rots unlisted in a damp warehouse. But in Boston, the consignees will not resign. 2 of them are sons of Governor Hutchinson himself, and the governor will not let the ships leave without paying. Boston, alone of the 4 teaports, gets the immovable object. The first ship is called the Dartmouth. She comes up the harbour on the 28th of November, 1773, a Sunday, which in Boston is itself a scandal, with 114 chests of East India Company tea in her hold. Behind her, in the following days, come the Eleanor and the brig Beaver, sister cargoes, until 3 ships lie tied at Griffin's Wharf carrying, all told, 342 chests. Call it £90,000 and more of tea. Enough to brew, someone will later calculate, close on 19 million cups, value on the company's books, £9,659 sterling, and change. Hold that number. The company certainly will. The clock starts. 20 days from the Dartmouth's entry. Day 20 is the 16th of December, and your house girl, like every house in Boston, spends those 20 days holding its breath. The town meets, not the legal town meeting, something bigger, the body of the people, thousands crammed into Old South Meeting House because Faneuil Hall can't hold them, farmers tramping in from Dorchester and Roxbury to stand in the cold aisles. The master goes and comes back with his jaw set. The master's brother practically lives there. A guard of 25 men watches the tea ships every night to make sure not one chest slips ashore. The consignees flee to the fortress on Castle Island and refuse everything. The governor from his country house in Milton refuses everything. In the parlour, the tea table is quietly stopped. No afternoons. No callers. The mistress locks the tea chest. You watch her do it, and this time the key does not come back out. She stands there a moment with her palm flat on the lid, the way you'd rest a hand on a sick child, and then she puts the key in her pocket and walks out, and the equipage sits on its shelf like a choir with no church. That's the mistress's arc, if a serving girl may narrate it. She is not a rebel. She is a woman who owns 12 cups from her grandmother, 11 whole and 1 cracked, and she can read weather. She has stopped serving tea for the same reason ships reef sails. The 16th of December, 1773 is a Thursday. It rains most of the day. A cold, fine, streaming rain. And something like 5,000 people, maybe more, a quarter of Boston plus the country towns, pack Old South and the streets around it to hear the last throw fail. The Dartmouth's owner, young Francis Roch, is sent riding through the rain to Milton to beg the governor one final time for a pass to sail the tea home to England. The meeting waits into the dark. Candles are lit. It's near 6 when Roch comes back, mud to the thighs, with the answer everyone already knows: no pass. The duty will be demanded. Tomorrow the customs men can seize the tea and land it under the guns of the fleet. And Samuel Adams rises and says, this is recorded, that this meeting can do nothing more to save the country. Tradition holds those words were the signal. Historians will spend 2 centuries arguing whether they were meant as one. Men had begun slipping out before he spoke, and the war whoop from the street came so hard on his sentence that nobody can untangle cause from cue. I'll tell you it straight tonight the way the record leaves it. A plan already existed, and Adams's sentence and the whoop and the emptying of the church all happened inside the same few minutes. Signal or coincidence, the effect was identical. You are there. Not in the church. Girls who sleep behind kitchen doors don't get pews at history. But in the street outside with Cook jammed in the crowd under the eaves, because the mistress wanted word brought back, and because Cook, whose husband the sea took, goes where crowds go the way other women go to sermons. You hear the roar come out through the doors of Old South like heat out of an oven, and then the crowd turns, all of it, one animal, and begins to move downhill toward the water, and you and Cook are in it, and of it, whether you choose or not, shoes slipping on wet cobbles, somebody's elbow in your back, torchlight sliding along shop fronts, and beneath the excitement something else, something stranger, that you will try to describe for the rest of your life and never quite manage. Quiet. The crowd is nearly silent. Thousands of people walking to the sea in the dark, and it's quiet enough to hear the rain dripping off the eaves, quiet the way church is quiet. This is the thing the prints and the paintings will get wrong for 200 years, showing a riot, a whooping carnival. The witnesses, the real ones, whose accounts survive, keep reaching for the same wrong-sized words, solemn, still, like a funeral, one says. Boston has decided something, and the decision is so large that nobody wants to jostle it. At the water's edge, Griffin's Wharf, low tide. There's your low tide smell, the sulphur mud breath of the flats, mixed now with rain and tar and pitch smoke off the torches, and the 3 ships lying dark against the darker harbour, masts dissolving upward into the drizzle. And past you, through the lane, the crowd opens without being asked. They come. Anywhere from 30 to 60 of them at first, maybe 100 and more before the night's done. Nobody will ever fix the number, because the whole town will spend 50 years elaborately not knowing who they were. Faces smeared with soot and lamp black and red ochre, blankets over shoulders, hatchets and axes in hand. Mohawks, everyone says, and no one is fooled, and that's the point. The disguise isn't meant to deceive, it's meant to declare. This deed belongs to no name you can hang. Summer apprentices you'd swear you've passed on Cornhill. One going by you close enough to touch, smells of wood shavings and wet wool, and under the soot on his jaw there's a fresh razor nick, and he is trying so hard to walk like a warrior, and he is 19 at the very most. Cook's hand closes on your shoulder from behind. She doesn't say a word. Her grip does. They board the 3 ships in 3 parties, quiet as men going to work, because that's what it is, and this is what the accounts all agree on, the discipline of it. No shouting, no burning. Orders in low voices. They ask the ship's mates for keys and candles, ask, mind you, swing the chests up out of the holds with the ship's own block and tackle, and go at them with the hatchets. And here, you hear it before you understand it, comes the sound you were promised, the sound your fingers learned in a cellar 2 years ago. The hatchets don't just bite wood, they bite metal, that soft, dull lining, the lead sheeting folded like paper around the leaf to keep the ocean out. It has to be chopped through, chest after chest, and it makes the strangest music, the crack of the boards, then a duller, flatter note, almost sad, and then the long shh of 100 weight of tea pouring over the rail into the dark. Crack, thud, hush, crack, thud, hush. 342 times, spread over 3 ships and 3 hours, and the crowd stands in the rain and listens the way people listen to surf. The smell reaches you in the 2nd hour. The tide is out. The water by the wharf is barely 2 feet deep in places, and the tea heaps up on the flats faster than the harbour can take it. Great sodden drifts of it, windrows of it, rising out of the shallows, 92,000 pounds and more of the finest leaf of the age, Bohea and Congo, and Singlo and Hyson, steeping in the December harbour, and the cold air fills with a monstrous parody of the parlour. That soft raisin and woodbox breath, the mistress's morning smell, the Empire's smell, brewed in salt mud by the acre. The biggest pot of tea ever made on the face of the earth, and not one soul permitted to drink it. Boys wade out along the flats, beating the floating heaps down with oars and rakes so nothing can be salvaged. One man is caught stuffing his coat lining with leaf. They strip the coat off his back and send him up the wharf through a gauntlet of kicks. Not thieves this night. That distinction is the whole sermon. 3 hours. By 9 or so it's done. The decks are swept. Swept with brooms. The ship's logs attest it. A broken padlock is replaced the next day because it belonged to a ship's captain and not to the East India Company. No one is hurt. Nothing else is touched. The crowd drains away uphill through the rain as quietly as it came, and you and Cook walk home without one word until the corner of Hanover Street, where she stops and looks back down toward the black water and says, to the night as much as to you. Well, there's no unsaying that. She's right, and everyone knows she's right, and that's the strange electric grief humming under Boston's chimneys tonight. John Adams, a country lawyer with a habit of writing down exactly what he thinks, puts it in his diary the very next morning. So bold, so daring, so firm, intrepid and inflexible. An epocha in history, he calls it. And in London, when the news lands 7 weeks later, nobody laughs about pennies anymore. The King's government answers with hammers, close the port of Boston until the tea is paid for, strip Massachusetts of its charter, troops in the town, the harbour sealed by warships, the coercive acts, the colonists call them intolerable, and by the spring of 1775 on a road through Lexington and Concord, the argument stops being an argument. That's the first war, the one your title promised. And here is the part almost nobody tells you, the part this whole night turns on. The destruction of the tea wasn't the end of tea's troubles in America. It was the beginning of tea's trial. Because you cannot spend a decade telling yourself that a leaf is the taste of submission, and then wade to a war through drifts of it, and never again lift the cup the same way. What happens next doesn't happen in harbours. It happens in kitchens. It happens to teapots and grandmothers and habits 2 generations deep. The Empire lost a cargo that night. The leaf lost a continent. Slowly, cup by cup, starting now, through the winter and spring of 1774, while Parliament sharpens its hammers, the colonies do something governments never quite believe ordinary people will do. They police their own pleasures. Committees form in every town, committees of inspection, of correspondence, of safety. And when the First Continental Congress meets in Philadelphia that autumn, it binds all the colonies into the Continental Association. No British goods imported, none consumed. And at the centre of the forbidden list, named and shamed above all else, sits tea. Not just company tea, tea. The committees publish the names of violators in the newspapers as enemies of American liberty. And in a world where all business runs on reputation, a printed name is a slow hanging. And now watch what happens inside your house, because this is where the war reaches the shelf with the 12 cups. The mistress holds out precisely nowhere. There is no scene. One morning in the spring of 1774, she simply has you carry the tea table up to the attic. You and the master's brother take a leg each on the stairs, and the pillar and claw base knocks against every second banister like a protest. And the equipage is wrapped in flannel, piece by piece. The pot, the tongs, the strainer, the 11 whole cups and the 12th with its crack turned inward and packed into the same little locked chest that once held the leaf. She does the wrapping herself. She won't let you touch the cups. At the end she holds the cracked one a moment longer than the others, the fisherman and his bridge worn faint by 3 generations of thumbs, and says, "Not to you, because no one in that room is worth saying it to except the cup. My grandmother carried you from Bristol." And she puts it in the dark and turns the key, and that is the sound of an empire ending in one household, a small brass click. Don't mistake her, though. Half of it is conviction. The other half is arithmetic, because the committees are watching and the mistress can count. A merchant's wife seen pouring tea in 1774 is a merchant losing customers by 1775. Patriotism and prudence pour from the same pot, and no one asks which is which. That's how boycotts actually win. if you want the honest mechanics of it. They make virtue cheaper than the alternative. What fills the empty place at the table? For a while, hot nonsense. The newspapers fill up with recipes for Liberty tea, brews of raspberry leaf, leucostrife, sage, dried strawberry leaves, anything native that will turn water brown, and everyone drinks them with performative satisfaction. And cook, forced to dry raspberry leaves in her own kitchen, delivers her verdict on the second morning where only you can hear, "Tastes like a barn smells." It does. Liberty tea is a flag, not a drink. Flags don't have to taste of anything, but there's another candidate. Dark, bitter, already waiting in the coffee houses, already sold green at the apothecaries, needing no ship from London, because it grows on this side of the world now, in the Dutch and French islands of the Caribbean, in Suriname and Martinique and Saint-Domingue, close enough that Yankee schooners can fetch it without asking the Empire's permission. A drink with no East India Company anywhere in its story. A drink no committee will ever print your name for. And in July of 1774, a stout Braintree lawyer riding the court circuit gives us the moment, preserved in his own hand, in a letter to his wife Abigail dated the 6th of July. John Adams, tired and thirsty at the end of a day's ride, stops at a tavern and asks his landlady, "I'll give you his own words because they're better than any I could invent. Is it lawful for a weary traveller to refresh himself with a dish of tea, provided it has been honestly smuggled or paid no duties?" And the answer comes back, "No, sir, we've renounced all tea in this place. I can't make tea, but I'll make you coffee." And Adams, who loved tea, mind you, this is a man raised on it, reports to Abigail, "Accordingly, I have drank coffee every afternoon since, and have borne it very well. Tea must be universally renounced. I must be weaned, and the sooner the better. I must be weaned. There's the whole nation in 4 words, written down in real ink by a real man in a real July. Not I prefer coffee, not coffee is better. Weaned, a word for infants and mothers, a word that admits the leaf was mother's milk and swears it off anyway. Multiply that tavern by 10,000 taverns, that afternoon by a decade of afternoons, and you are watching the palate of a people being bent by hand, and it isn't only lawyers and landladies. In October of 1774, the 25th it's documented, the papers of the day record it and London's cartoonists mocked it. 51 women in Edenton, North Carolina, sign their names, their actual names in a century when women's names did not go on public documents, to a resolution renouncing tea and British cloth. The London prints ridicule them viciously, sharp-nosed harridans neglecting their children over a punch bowl. The ridicule is the tribute. Somewhere in the Empire's bones it understands what it's looking at. When the tea table itself, the most feminine institution in colonial America, the mistress's one parliament, votes to abolish itself, the ministry has lost something no fleet can retake. Then comes the war itself, the long one, 8 years of it, and tonight is not the night to march you through it. We keep the guns at the horizon on this channel. From where you stand, girl, the war is mostly this. The master's trade strangled by the blockade, salt fish with no buyers and no salt. The master's brother gone to the lines round Boston in 75, and back a year later with 2 fingers less, and no wish to discuss which battle took them. Prices going mad, sugar tripling, then vanishing, the awful spring the town emptied and the awful year the redcoats held it. Cook's knees giving out on the cellar stairs, and you, 17 by then, doing her hauling and yours, and tea, when it can be had at all smuggled through the lines, Tea has become a curse word. Crowds in more than one town seize hoarded chests and burn them in the square. Merchants suspected of selling it get their windows explained to them. Whatever the law says at any given moment, the verdict of the street holds for 30 years and more. Tea is what they drink. The lobsterbacks, the Tories, them. Coffee, meanwhile. And I want to be honest with you here because tonight's story is often told too neatly. Coffee does not conquer America overnight. It has troubles of its own. War prices, scarcity, hoarding. In the summer of 1777, in Boston itself, a crowd of angry women, 100 of them at least. Abigail Adams describes it in a letter. She calls it the account she heard, and history calls it the Boston Coffee Riot. Carted off a hoarding merchant's coffee by force. One report says they seized him by the neck and tossed him into the cart until he surrendered his keys. Read that twice. 4 years after the Tea Party, Boston women are rioting for coffee, not against it. That's how fast the ground is shifting under the kitchen. The new drink is scarce enough to fight over because it is already becoming necessary. Peace comes in 1783, and here's the joke history plays. The tea comes back. Of course it does. Habits too. Generations deep don't die of one decade's politics. The ships of the new republic sail straight for Canton the moment the ink dries. The Empress of China clears New York Harbour in February 1784 with the stars and stripes at her mizzen and comes home stuffed with tea and porcelain, and her backers clear a tidy profit, and for a while it looks like the whole affair was a lover's quarrel. Looks like. But 3 things have changed forever, and they are the gears of everything that follows, so count them on your fingers in the dark. 1. Tea now carries a memory. It will never again be neutral in an American mouth. Every pot poured in the new republic pours against a headwind of sermons, boycotts, burned chests and printed names. A faint aftertaste of them. 2. Coffee has been inside the door. A generation learned to make it, learned to like it, or at least to bear it. Learned, Adams's word, to be weaned. The palate of a nation is a door that swings slowly, but it has swung, and there's a wedge in it. 3. And this one is pure geography and money, and it will do more than the other 2 combined. Tea comes from the far side of the planet, through anybody's navy and everybody's tolls. Coffee grows 600 miles from Charleston, and the century that's coming, the century of tariffs and tonnage and riverboats, and a country tilting west, is going to be won by whichever drink is cheap, near, and strong. Remember those 3 words, cheap, near, strong. As for your house, the mistress lives to see the peace, dies in the first winter of it, and the little locked chest passes to her niece, who unwraps the flannel one Sunday while you stand by with the tray. 11 whole cups and 1 cracked one. The fisherman still on his bridge, the empire he was painted under gone from the map. The niece serves tea in them that very afternoon. Canton tea, Republican tea, tea with no 3pence on it. And it's lovely, and everyone says so, and it is also unmistakably a museum piece now. Something one does on Sundays. Something one's grandmother did daily. That's how drinks die, if you want to know. Not banned, demoted. From bread to cake. And you? You marry a cooper in 1786. A quiet man with forearms like Cook's and a kindness Cook never had room for. And you set up housekeeping in 2 rooms that are entirely, dizzyingly yours, and on your own table, bought second-hand, bolted at the corner, sits a little iron coffee mill. Because coffee is what your husband drinks, and what the wharves drink, and what the new century is starting to drink, and because Though you'd never put it this way, you have no idea the moment even mattered. You are the girl who stood 10 seconds in a grey November street with her basket, breathing in a doorway, thinking that, whatever that is, I want it. Every morning you grind a handful. The little mill growls like a dog dreaming, and the smell with the edges fills 2 rooms that are yours. The gun on the table fires, years late, in a kitchen history never visited. Most guns do. Sleep now, girl. You did nothing famous, and you carried the whole thing on your back regardless. 31 steps at a time, 1 kettle at a time. Whoever you were, and you were thousands, the story closes gently over you here. Because the clock of this night is turning, and the republic you scrubbed floors for is about to do what young countries do. Count its money, cut its roads, and choose its drug. The year is turning 1800, then 1810, then 1830. Come down to the waterfront of New York. There's a boy there with a scoop in his hand and green beans in a barrel, and he has no idea he's the hinge of our story either. None of the hinges ever do. It's a March morning in 1833, and the first thing you know about the day is the weight of a coffee sack against your spine. 130 pounds, give or take. A burlap sack of green coffee off a Rio brig, and you're carrying it up a plank from a lighter at the foot of Wall Street with your knees complaining and the burlap fibres biting through your shirt. And the man behind you carrying the next one is telling you to move your bones. And this exact ache between your shoulder blades is what the pivot of a national habit feels like from the inside. Nobody hands you a proclamation. They hand you a sack. New pair of borrowed eyes then. You're a boy of 15 now, a grocer's boy on Front Street in New York. And let me tell you what New York is in 1833, because it is not the biggest town in the colonies anymore. There are no colonies. It's a city of 250,000 on its way to half, swollen every year by ships full of Irish and Germans and Yankees off worn-out hill farms. A city that smells of horse, tar, oysters, and coal smoke, where the Erie Canal, 8 years open now, has stitched the whole Great Lakes country to this one waterfront, and everything the interior eats, drinks, and wears goes up the Hudson in barges. Your employer's shop stands in a row of brick counting houses and groceries 2 blocks off the East River docks. Barrels on the sidewalk, a cat on the sugar hogshead, a long counter worn to a chain, and behind it, in bins and sacks and chests, the 2 rivals of tonight's story sitting side by side like a married couple not speaking. On the left, tea, chests of it, stenciled with Chinese characters and the marks of New York's China houses, lead-lined still. Some things never change. Young Hyson and old Bohea and gunpowder green rolled in little pellets, respectable, genteel, and expensive, because every leaf of it still crosses the whole planet to get here. Canton to Sandy Hook, 4 months and 15,000 miles on a good voyage. On the right, coffee, sacks of it, green as spring peas, hard as gravel. Rio and Santos out of Brazil, Java when the Dutch ships come, a little mocha for the fancy trade, Cuba and La Guaira and Saint-Domingue, though far less from Saint-Domingue than in your father's day, and thereby hangs a piece of the story I'll flag honestly and step past quickly. Before 1791, the French slave colony of Saint-Domingue, Haiti now, grew something like half the world's coffee, under a brutality so total that the enslaved rose and burned it out, and world coffee had to find a new home. It found Brazil, vast, near, and worked, it must be said plainly, by enslaved hands too on an enormous scale, for decades yet. The cheap bean in your sack has a price someone else is paying out of sight of Front Street. Tonight's story is about the drinking, but I won't pretend the growing was gentle. It wasn't. Now, your master, call him the grocer, a Connecticut man with steel spectacles and a ledger where his heart should be, though you'll learn better about the heart eventually, teaches you the trade in numbers, because in a grocery numbers are the trade. Stand at the counter with him on your first week while he drills you like a catechism. Green Rio, what do we pay? 10 cents the pound, wholesale, near enough. Some years 8, some years 12, but call it a dime. And we sell at 12, 13. And tea, young Hyson, the middling chest, 50 cents the pound, 75 for the better, $1 and up for the finest. So a labouring man with a shilling in his pocket, and here he taps the counter, tap, tap like a schoolmaster, buys us ounce or two of gentility, or a pound of wakefulness. Which does he buy? You know the answer. You watch the answer walk in the door 40 times a day. The answer is a German cabinet maker's wife who buys 2 pounds of green Rio every week and roasts it herself in a skillet on her own stove. Every tenement kitchen in this ward does it, and on still evenings whole streets of the East Side smell like one enormous roaster. That edge of burnt perfume drifting over the chimneys. These smell that girl in Boston caught in a doorway 60 years ago, now settled over entire neighbourhoods like weather. The answer is an Irish hod carrier who takes his coffee at dawn from a street vendor's can, thick with molasses, because a man who carries brick up ladders for 12 hours does not want a delicate drink. He wants a strong one, hot now, cheap. The answer is a boarding house keeper who buys 20 pounds at a go and stretches it with chicory, and you learn to spot chicory stretchers by their too dark, too shiny grind. The first of 100 adulterations you'll learn to smell in this trade, because wherever coffee goes, fraud follows it like a gull follows a fishing boat. Roasted rye, ground peas, burnt bread crumbs, things I'd rather not name. The government won't seriously police any of it for 70 years. Buyer, beware. Boy, learn. And when I say coffee is winning the counter in 1833, I need you to understand it isn't sentiment doing it. Nobody at your counter mentions the Boston Tea Party. Most of your customers weren't born when it happened. Plenty weren't born in this country. What's doing it is 3 dry engines grinding away year after year, and here they are. The same 3 words I gave you at the end of the war chapter. Cheap, near, strong. Cheap. And here the government of the young republic quietly takes a side. The Congress needs revenue, and revenue means tariffs. And for decades both drinks paid duty at the customs house. Tea at rates that ran, depending on the sort and the decade, several times coffee's burden. Because tea was a luxury of the parlour and coffee a grocery of the kitchen, and governments tax silk before they tax bread. Then, in the early 1830s, the Acts of 1830 and 1832, in the general breaking down of the old tariff wall, the duties come off the breakfast table almost entirely. Coffee free and green tea from China in American ships free too. But by then the die is long cast, because free of duty helps the near one more than the far one. Which brings us to near. Brazil declared itself an empire independent of Portugal in 1822, and its coffee frontier is exploding down the Paraíba Valley. The world has never seen the bean planted on this scale. And every year the price of green coffee sags a little lower, and every year the Rio to New York run, 3-4 weeks with kind winds, gets more crowded with brigs. Meanwhile, every pound of tea is still a voyage around the world. Distance is a tax no Congress can repeal, and the ocean collects it on every chest. Strong, and this one is about what the country's doing all day. Because the America filling up your counter isn't a nation of parlours. It's a nation of clearings, canals, forges, decks, and half-broken prairie. It rises in the dark, and of the two drinks on your shelves, one is a leaf you steep gently to accompany conversation, and the other is a seed you burn and boil until it can accompany an axe. The frontier drinks coffee out of tin, boiled in the same pot for days, ground settled with a piece of fish skin or a broken eggshell strong enough, the flatboatmen say, to float a horseshoe. It's not that tea can't be strong, it's that coffee insists on it. This is a country in a hurry, doing violence to a continent of stumps, and it has chosen the drink that tastes like effort. There's a fourth engine too, softer, and you see it at the counter every day. The memory of the First War faded from argument into instinct. Tea never recovered its manhood in America, if you'll let me use the century's own crooked language. Somewhere between 1770 and 1830, without anyone signing anything, tea in the States became feminine, elderly, Sunday-ish, faintly English, the drink of aunts, and the sons of the Revolution, and the immigrant sons who inherited the country's instincts along with its wharves, drank against that image without ever thinking about it. Nobody remembers the argument. Everyone inherits the verdict. You can watch the verdict pile up in the customs figures dry as they are. And dry numbers, well handled, are lullabies too, so take these down the dark with you. Around 1800, the American per-head share of imported coffee ran under £1 a year. By 1830, £3. By mid-century, 5 and better, and climbing toward 8 as the 50s close, the young republic pouring in more sacks every single year than the whole empire's tea trade ever dreamed. And tea, flat, £1 a head, more or less, decade after decade drifting gently down. 2 lines on a chart, one climbing like a canal boy's wages, one lying there like Sunday afternoon. That is the quiet reversal, and it happened right there across your counter, dime by dime, sack by sack, with nobody proclaiming anything. Words drift in the door too. Word with cargo manifests of their own, and since this channel can't resist an etymology, take 2, both flagged true. Coffee wandered into English from the Arabic kahwa, which some old lexicons say first meant wine, that which suppresses appetite, though scholars argue the root. Through Turkish kava and Dutch coffee, a word that walked from Yemen to Constantinople to Amsterdam to your counter. And tea splits the whole world in two by the road it travelled. Lands that got the leaf overland out of North China say cha, chai in Russia and India, cha in Portugal, and lands that bought it by sea from the Fujian coast, where the local word was te, say tea, they, tea. Say either word and you're reciting a trade route. Everything in your shop is a map if you read it right. The grocer, for all his ledger heart, reads it right. Your last scene with him, keep it. A January evening, 1837 maybe, shop shuttered, the two of you clean in the coffee bins by lamplight, and he weighs a handful of green Rio in his palm, lets it rattle back, and says, "The nearest he ever comes to philosophy. My grandmother served tea to British officers in this city, wouldn't have coffee in the house, said it smelled of the docks." He closes the bin. She was right. It does. A pause. The lamp hisses. The docks are the country now, boy. Sell accordingly. Sell accordingly. He dies of the cholera in 49. The shop passes to his son. You, by then, have a grocery of your own in Brooklyn, and a wife who roasts Friday evenings in a cylinder over the stove, turning the crank while the smell with the edges rolls out over the yard, and your neighbours know the day of the week by it. The verdict piles up pound by pound. By the 1850s, coffee is simply what Americans drink. North, south, east, and out where the wagons go. 5 pounds and more ahead and rising. The fuel of a country that has decided with terrible unfinished business on its books to be in a hurry. Terrible unfinished business. You heard that. The books of the 1850s do not balance. Not the ledgers of the tariff, and not the older, darker ledger underneath the whole cheap bean bargain, and not the account between North and South, that every compromise only rolls forward at interest. And when that account finally comes due, in the spring of 1861, the country that goes marching off to settle it will pack, in every haversack on both sides of the ruin, well, one side will pack it, the other will spend 4 years dreaming about it. The Second War is here, and it is, among 1,000 more important things, the greatest coffee story ever recorded. Fill your tin cup. We're going to Maryland. The sound that wakes you is not a bugle. It's a rasping, clinking, grinding growl coming from everywhere at once in the grey before dawn. Hundreds of rifle butts all around you in the dark, crushing coffee beans in the bottoms of tin cups. New eyes one more time and cold ones. You're 20 years old. A farm boy from Ohio in a wool uniform stiff with dried mud. A private in a Western regiment folded into the Army of the Potomac, and it is the middle of September, 1862, in the low green hills of Western Maryland, and you have been marching for what feels like your whole life. Your feet are 2 blisters wearing shoes. Your shoulders carry a groove from the knapsack straps the way a serving girl's palm once carried the groove of a bucket handle. The body always keeps the ledger, and before the sun is a rumour, you do what 60,000 men within 5 miles of you are doing. You sit up in the wet grass, work your rifle around, drop a fistful of government beans into your blackened tin cup, and grind them against the steel butt plate. Rasp, 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 adding your small growl to the great one rolling over the countryside like insects. There are men in this army who own actual coffee mills from home. There is even a rumour, you've heard it a dozen times, never seen it once, of a Sharp's carbine with a grinder built right into the stock, and I'll flag that one for you honestly from up here in the future. A handful of such carbines with mills in their stocks really do survive in collections, but whether they were meant for coffee or for grinding grain, and whether more than a few dozen ever existed, is argued to this day. Treat it as the army treated most rumours. Too good to check. What's not rumour is the rifle butt and the cup. That's how the Army of the Potomac grinds its breakfast, and archaeologists will be digging dented tin cups out of these fields for a century. Then the little fires, 1,000 of them at dawn, buttoned into the folds of the hills, each one boiling a cup or a battered pot, and over the whole encamped army rises the smell. You'd know it anywhere now. Whole nations would. Wood smoke and burnt beans and bacon fat. The smell of the Union Army awake. One of your messmates, a schoolteacher from Oberlin who counts things because counting keeps his hands from shaking, claims a man can smell an army's coffee 3 miles off given a kind wind, and that consequently there are no surprises in this war before 9 in the morning. He's joking. He's also not entirely wrong. Now let me read you the small print of the miracle, because this is the part your grandchildren will not believe. The coffee is government issue. It's in the law. The United States Army ration, the official list of what the Republic owes each soldier each day, includes, alongside the salt pork and the flinty crackers they call hardtack, a fixed allowance of coffee. green beans by the sack, issue by weight, roughly 1/10 of a pound a day when the issue is honest, which works out to somewhere near £36 of coffee a year per man. £36. A colonial family of the old century might not have seen that much tea in a decade. Your government, bankrupt, improvising, fighting for its life, has decided that among the things it absolutely must put into your hands, between bullets and bread, is a caffeinated seed from Brazil, and it moves oceans of it. Hundreds of ships worth a year through the port of New York alone, millions of pounds, rivers of beans flowing south in sacks stenciled US. Why? Because the army has learned what your body already knows at every halt. This war runs on it. Coffee before the march. Coffee at the halt. Coffee after the fight, for the ones still there to boil it. It is the only mercy issued daily, the only heat, the only ritual, the only thing in your haversack that feels like a kitchen instead of a punishment, and it is, though nobody uses the word yet, a drug, the army's chosen stimulant, worth more per ounce to morale than anything else the quartermasters carry. One historian, up in your future, will go counting through digitized Civil War diaries and find the word coffee turning up more often than war, more often than bullet, more often than mother. I've seen the claim. I pass it to you flagged as one scholar's count. But soldier, you've read your own diary. Do you doubt it? The army's slang has already made the drink into a measuring stick for men. A soldier who hangs back from the fight, who's always somehow boiling a cup at the rear when the firing starts. The army calls him a coffee cooler, letting it cool while better men go forward. It's a real term. It'll live in the dictionaries of army slang for 50 years. When your company wants to say a man is worthless, it doesn't mention courage at all. It mentions his cup, and on the other side of the creek that's coming, the other army, the grey one. The coffee has run out. The blockade did it. The Union Navy sits on every southern port, and green coffee is now worth more than silver in Richmond, and the Confederacy has become a vast, sad laboratory of substitutes. Parched corn, rye, okra seeds, acorns, chicory, sweet potato cut small and roasted brown. The southern newspapers print recipes the way they once printed poetry. None of it works, because none of it carries the one thing the seed carries. Across the picket lines on quiet nights, this is documented up and down this war, the two armies trade for it. Southern tobacco floated over a stream on a little plank boat. Northern coffee coming back by return voyage. Enemies provisioning each other's habits between attempts on each other's lives. Some nights the pickets call softly across the water first to fix the exchange rate. Hold all of that. Because it's the 16th of September, 1862, and tomorrow this valley you're camped in, a shallow green bowl of cornfields and orchards around a Dunker church and a creek called Antietam, is going to hold the bloodiest single day in the history of this country. It still holds it now, from where I'm telling you this. One day. Something near 23,000 men killed, wounded, or missing between the first musket and the dark. I promised you long ago that on this channel we watch such things the way the records small people watch them. From the edge. Because that's where you are, and because the middle of that day belongs to the dead, and I will not march you into it for entertainment. Your regiment spends the morning of the 17th in reserve, on a low ridge behind the guns, which means what you get of the battle is this: the ground itself shivering under your boots like a struck drumhead. Smoke standing over the cornfield to the north in a dirty wall lit from inside. Sound in layers, the artillery's deep door slamming, the long tearing canvas crackle of musketry by brigade, and beneath it, in the pauses, a thin, continuous human sound off the fields that your mind refuses to file. Batteries of guns with hot black muzzles, stretcher parties coming back past your line all morning, and the faces of the stretcher bearers worse than what they carry, because the faces can still explain. You grip your rifle. You do sums with no numbers in them. The schoolteacher beside you counts under his breath. Caissons, church bells, he imagines. Anything. And in the middle of that afternoon, you see the thing you'll still be telling in 50 years. And the beautiful, outrageous fact is that it's true. It's documented. There's a monument to it standing on that field in your future. Along the line to your left, where a battered Ohio regiment has been fighting since morning with empty bellies, a wagon comes up through the shell fire, actually up into range, mules and all, driven by a stocky 19-year-old commissary sergeant who has spent the day filling camp kettles with hot coffee and cooked rations, and who then, against orders and good sense, hauls them to the fighting line. He moves down the crouching ranks under fire with kettles and a dipper, pouring coffee into held-out tin cups while the air overhead makes sounds air should not make. The men cheer him. Cheer. In the middle of Antietam for coffee. The sergeant's name is William McKinley. The men holding out their cups cannot know that they have just been served coffee under fire by a future president of the United States, the 25th, and that on this field one day a stone monument, put up while some of them still live, will commemorate not a charge, not a stand, but a delivery of hot coffee. That's this war in one image. The Republic's whole strange love affair in a dipper. The battle gutters out at dark. The Army of Northern Virginia holds its torn line the next day, then slips back over the Potomac. The North will call it victory enough to hang a proclamation on. 5 days later, Lincoln announces that in the new year, the slaves of the rebellion shall be free, and the war becomes at last, in law, and not just in fact, about the thing underneath every ledger in this story. And your regiment, the morning after the battle, in the wrecked farmyard where it has ended up, you boil coffee, of course you do, in silence, with hands that aren't steady, downwind of things I won't describe. The survivors grind beans against rifle butts. The growl again, ragged now, half the voices missing, and stand together drinking from dented cups, and it is not celebration. Nothing on that field is celebration. It's the other thing coffee has become in this army. Proof of being alive, taken hot, twice daily. The cup is how you know you made it. The school teacher, he made it too. Hold on to that. Passes you the sugar he's been hoarding since Frederick and says nothing. And you say nothing. And that is the entire conversation. And it is enough. You'll make it out of this war. You and your cup both. 3 more years of it. Fredericksburg's cold. The wilderness is smoke. Roads beyond counting. And the cup goes where you go. Black inside as a chimney. Your name scratched on it with a nail at Camp Dennison in another lifetime. And in the summer of 1865 you walk back up the lane to an Ohio farmhouse, with that cup tied to a blanket roll, and here is the moment tonight's whole chapter was for, so let it be quiet. Your mother makes tea. She's kept some, dear as it is, a 1/4 pound in a japanned tin she saved for exactly this morning. Her mother's habit from the East, the good pot, the best table. She pours it proud, and you drink it, and you thank her, and it tastes like... You search honestly. It tastes like warm water that once heard about flavour, like Sunday, like before. And the next morning, Early, she comes down to the kitchen and finds you at the stove with your black tin cup. Boiling ground coffee the army way, eggshell dropped in to settle the grounds, and she stands in the doorway a long moment watching the sun the war returned. "Well," she says finally, "I'll learn to make it your way. Multiply her by every mother, wife and sweetheart in the loyal states, because the armies of the Union mustered out something like 2 million men across the war, and nearly every one of them came home exactly like you. Habituated twice a day, 36 pounds a year, to a drink that now tasted of survival itself. The first war made coffee a flag. The second made it a reflex, and a reflex in 2 million households isn't a fashion. It's the national palate signed in tin. Tea never had a chance at those tables again. It wasn't hated anymore. It was worse than hated. It was beside the point. Grandmother's drink from before. But a reflex is still a chore in 1865. Green beans, skillet roasting, scorched batches, the crank and the smoke. Somewhere in Pittsburgh, right now, as you unpack that blanket roll, a young wholesale grocer named John is watching housewives burn their coffee and having the kind of idea that builds the next America. The war taught the country to drink it. Business is about to teach the country to buy it. Westward now, the third chapter of the cup, the one with the peppermint stick in it. The Texas night is enormous and the fire is very small, and you are crouched at the edge of its light turning a crank, and if you stop turning it before the cook says stop, God himself cannot help you. Last borrowing of eyes before the modern world arrives, and these are young ones again. You're 16, the louse. That's the actual trail word for the cook's helper, the louse. And no, nobody asked how you feel about it. On a drive pushing 2,500 longhorns up the trail from South Texas toward the railhead at Dodge City, Kansas. It is the spring of 1878. Your world is a chuck wagon, one wagon, rebuilt army surplus mostly, with a hinged box on the tail that folds down into a kitchen counter, drawers for flour and beans and salt pork, a water barrel lashed to the side, a coffee grinder bolted to the wagon box. Bolted, like ship's furniture, because everything on this prairie that isn't bolted down blows to Nebraska. The cook, trail cooks answer to cookie behind their backs and sir to their faces, and yours is a scarred, sun-cured tyrant of maybe 50, who was a sergeant once and a prisoner once and will discuss neither, runs this wagon like a man of war. On a drive, the cook is paid double a cowhand's wage. Nobody grumbles. An outfit can lose a man and go on. Lose the cook and the drive dies of mutiny in a week. And the engine of the cook's whole authority, the sun his little system turns around, is coffee, not food. Coffee. 12 men riding watches around the clock, 2 hours on, wet saddles, night stampedes, river crossings, and the pot never, ever empties. That's the law of the trail. A gallon and more black iron pot rides the coals from before dawn till the last night watch comes in, and the recipe out here is its own genre of folklore. A fistful of ground coffee to every cup of water, boiled outright, settled with a dash of cold water or an eggshell when eggs exist, which out here they don't. The hands like it. I'm going to give you the trail's own saying, flagged as saying, strong enough to float a horseshoe. You've heard a Kansas variant too. If the horseshoe sinks, add more coffee. Nobody has ever produced the horseshoe. The pot is beyond testing anyway. Its inside hasn't seen bare metal since the Grant administration. Now watch what you're actually cranking, because this is the hinge. Out of the wagon box comes a manila paper package, 1 pound exactly, printed yellow and black and red, a flying angel in a long skirt sailing across the label, and a name, Arbuckle's Ariosa coffee. Inside, whole roasted beans, everyone glossy, lacquered looking, coated in a thin shine of sugar and egg glaze. And to understand what a miracle you're holding, you have to know what came before it. You heard it from your own mother in Texas. Green beans in a skillet, 20 minutes of stirring over a fire that wants to scorch them. One lapse of attention and the batch is ruined and money burns with it. Then, right at the end of the war, a Pittsburgh wholesale grocer named John Arbuckle looks at all that daily failure and does the obvious thing nobody had managed at scale. Roast the beans before selling them, seal them fast, package them 1 pound at a time, identical, branded, everywhere. In 1868 he patents the trick that makes it work. That egg and sugar glaze, a skin against the air, because roasted coffee goes stale fast and the glaze buys it time. By 1873 the package has its name, Ariosa. Nobody is entirely sure even now what the name meant. A for Arbuckle and the rest is guesswork and legend, and I flag it so. And by the time you're cranking this grinder in 1878, Arbuckle's is on its way to being the biggest name in American coffee, with roasting works in Brooklyn that will one day cover whole blocks and its own ships hauling beans up from Brazil. Out here, the brand isn't a brand. It's the language itself. A cowhand doesn't ask for coffee. He asks for Arbuckle's. There are folks on this trail who'd be honestly puzzled to learn the word wasn't the plant's own name, the coffee that won the West. The trade will call it later, and for once the slogan is barely exaggerating. And John Arbuckle, who understands the men at the far end of his supply chain better than they'd credit, packs 2 small sorceries into every pound. The first is for the cook. Inside each package, a stick of striped peppermint candy. And thereby the nightly rite you're watching right now. The One Trail memoirs will retell for 100 years. I'll flag it honestly as the trade's own beloved law, told everywhere, standardized by repetition. When the grinding needs doing, Cookie holds up the candy and calls, "Who wants the candy?" And grown men, gun-carrying, stampede-riding men who have not tasted sugar since Fort Worth, race to volunteer to grind coffee for a striped stick the size of your finger. Tonight nobody raced you for it. The hands are 10 miles back holding a nervous herd, so you crank and the candy is already dissolving in your cheek. Sweetness and peppermint cutting through 3 weeks of beans, dust and smoke. And you'd testify before Congress it's the best thing you have ever eaten. The second sorcery is on the package, a printed signature, Arbuckle Brothers, that clips out like a little banknote, redeemable by mail. Save them up and the catalogue opens. Razors, scissors, suspenders, curtains, a clock. Even, the item every bunkhouse jokes about and more than one cowboy has quietly redeemed. A plain gold wedding band. Sit with that image 1 second. A man rides 2,000 miles of weather behind other people's cattle, drinks the company's coffee at every fire, snips the company's signatures with his knife, and proposes marriage with 100 pounds of Ariosa. The frontier is being furnished, razored, curtained, clocked and wed, out of coffee wrappers. That's what a national brand is, and America has never really seen one at this scale before. Not a thing you buy, but a country you slowly join. Coupon by coupon, the pot boils, you grind. The same growl the rifle butts made in Maryland 16 years ago, domesticated now, bolted to a wagon. Listen to how a sound survives its war. Cookie throws the grounds in, lets it roll, kills the boil with a splash from the barrel and beats the triangle, and the nighthawks ride in out of the dark with their collars up. And here around this fire you can see the whole chapter of the age in one circle of light. The hands hold their cups in both hands the way the Union men did. Half of them learned it there. Your night boss carries a dented black cup with the name scratched on it. He didn't scratch. His father's Antietam to Abilene without a polish. The talk is horses, rivers, and the price of beef in Chicago. The tea of the parlours is 2,000 miles and one universe away. Out here the word tea comes up only in the old joke about the Englishman. Every outfit has one version. The greenhorn lord who asked the cook for tea with milk, and the cook's answer, which varies by telling and improves with each, and which I'll leave to your imagination since this is a family channel of sorts. The laughter rolls out into the dark where 2,500 cattle shift and grumble like a sea. Cookie pours you the last half cup, louses share, the thick end of the pot half grounds. You drink it anyway. You're 16, bone-tired, 800 miles from your mother, sugar-blessed, and holding a hot tin cup under more stars than arithmetic has names for. Sleep will still find you in 9 minutes flat. Coffee, whatever they say, was never really about staying awake. It's about a warm fist to hold in the cold. It always was. Ask any army. Now pull back with me, up and away from that one small fire, because it's one of thousands. The same yellow package is being cranked and boiled tonight in Dakota sod houses and Nevada mining camps and Kansas rail camps and Louisiana kitchens and Brooklyn tenements. This is what the third quarter of the century does to the cup. The railroads knit the country, the roasters industrialize, and coffee stops being a habit and becomes an industry with names. Out on the Pacific coast there's Folger's, a Nantucket boy, James Folger, who landed in Gold Rush San Francisco in 1850 and figured out, like Arbuckle after him, that the miner wants his coffee ready, not green. His company's red cans are climbing the whole western seaboard. Boston has Chase and Sanborn, who in the 1870s start sealing roasted coffee in cans. Every grocery shelf in the Republic is filling with eagles, angels, moons, names, and the numbers, one more spoonful of them, because they are the quiet drumbeat under everything. By the 1880s, the United States, with maybe 1/20th of the world population, is drinking somewhere between 1/4 and 1/3 of all the coffee on Earth. Per head it's £8-9 a year and still climbing. Tea, meanwhile, holds its little acre, round £1 a head, polite, beloved by some, going nowhere. 2 lines on the chart, remember. One of them is now simply the graph of America eating breakfast. One more name needs to enter the story before the lights of the new century come on, because you'll meet it on every shelf of the 20th down in Nashville, Tennessee, in the 1880s and 90s. A former travelling grocery salesman named Joel Cheek is blending coffees like a perfumer, convinced the right mixture is worth more than any single bean. He talks the city's grandest hotel, the Maxwell House, the place every drummer and senator passing through Nashville knows, into serving his blend and borrows its name for the label. That much is solid record. The man, the blend, the hotel, the name, and then there's the legend. And I owe you the flag on this one because it became one of the most famous advertising phrases in American history. The story goes that in 1907, Theodore Roosevelt, passing through Nashville and served the hotel's coffee at Andrew Jackson's Hermitage, drained his cup and declared it good to the last drop. Roosevelt really was there, really was served the coffee, and contemporary accounts really do have him praising it loudly. The man praised most things loudly. But the phrase itself? The slogan doesn't show up in Maxwell House advertising until years later. The attribution to Roosevelt wobbles under every historian who's leaned on it. And the company itself told the story with a wink for decades. So, the coffee is history, the last drop is marketing. On this channel you always get told which is which. That's the century turning then. The Cup Boston made a flag and the Army made a reflex. Business has now made a product. Packaged, branded, sloganed, national. By 1900, no one alive remembers a tea-drinking America. It's something in engravings, grandmother's grandmother, the cracked cup in the cabinet nobody uses. One thing more is required to finish a national habit, and only one thing gives it. A third war, the biggest of all, to seal the cup to the century, and to hand it, in passing, its modern name. The wind down of our night begins on the far side of it. Steady now, here it comes. But first, a small detour through a name, because somewhere between the cattle trails and the 20th century, American coffee picked up an alias, and the story of that alias is a perfect little lesson in how history actually works, which is to say, messily, with the best story usually losing to the boring one. Americans call a cup of coffee a cup of joe, and the story everybody tells, you may have heard it, it's told on Navy bases to this day, goes like this. In June of 1914, the Secretary of the Navy, a Southern newspaper man named Josephus Daniels, issued General Order 99, which abolished the officers' wine mess and made the United States Navy dry. That much is entirely true. The order is real, the date is real, the fury of the officers was extremely real. And from then on, the story goes, the strongest drink aboard any American warship was coffee, and the sailors, in salute to the man who'd done it to them, bitterly christened the stuff a cup of Josephus, a cup of Joe. It's a wonderful story. It is almost certainly not true. The killjoy detail, and on this channel we keep the killjoy details, is that nobody can find the phrase cup of Joe in print until around 1930, a decade and a half after the order, which is a long time for a barb that good to stay invisible. The word hunters offer duller candidates. That Joe is just worn-down slang from Jamoke, itself mashed together from Java and Mocha, the two great coffee names of the age. Or that Joe means simply the ordinary man, the average Joe, making coffee the common man's drink by name. Nobody knows. I'll say that plainly. Nobody knows. The etymology is contested. The Navy story is folklore with a real order at the bottom of it. And the phrase belongs to that large family of words that walked into English without signing the register. What is documented and what matters for our question is what the phrase reveals. By the 20th century, coffee in America had a nickname the way only beloved things get nicknames. Nobody ever called tea a cup of Tom. The first act of the century's sealing had already come in 1917, when America went into the Great War and the army went looking for coffee it could make in a trench, with nothing but hot water. It found a New York company already selling powdered instant coffee. G. Washington's refined coffee, no relation to the general, and yes, the soldiers in France really did write home about drinking a hot cup of George in the mud. Instant coffee tasted by every honest account like coffee's ghost with a grudge. It also required no roaster, no grinder, no pot, and no time, which in a war zone beats flavour every single day of the week. File that lesson. The next war is going to run on it, and the next war comes. Last pair of eyes then, the last of the night, so settle in and let this one come slow. It's a wet grey morning in Normandy, late July of 1944, and you're 19 years old. A rifleman from Brooklyn lying in the bottom of a foxhole scraped into a Norman hedgerow, and you're doing the single most American thing a man can do in a hole in France. You're making coffee with your helmet on. The kit is this, and every man in your platoon can work it blind. One flat waxed box, a K ration, breakfast unit. Inside, among the tinned chopped ham and egg, the biscuits, the fruit bar, the 4 cigarettes, a small envelope of soluble coffee, instant, powder. You've got a canteen cup, steel, that nests under your canteen. You've got a little folding stove, or, failing that, the great improvised tradition of the infantry. A ration tin punched with holes, a waxed box burning inside it almost smokeless, and the cup balanced on top. Water from the canteen. Iodine-flavoured. Because everything in this war is iodine-flavoured. You watch the surface for the first shiver of a boil, tear the envelope, pour, stir with a twig, and there it is. Pale, thin, faintly chemical, unmistakably coffee, in the way a photograph of your mother is unmistakably your mother. And you wrap both hands around the steel and put your back against the dirt wall of the hole, and for 90 seconds the war is over. The men around you are doing the same, spaced along the hedgerow, each in his hole, each with his little tin volcano. At dawn, the whole line steams like a row of cook fire in miniature. It's the same picture it always was, if you've been with me all night, and I know you have. The rifle butt grinders in the Maryland dark, the nighthawks at the chuck wagon, the girl at the kettle on Hanover Street. The circle around the fire keeps shrinking. A parlour, a campfire, a foxhole, and the cup keeps being the same cup, the one warm thing held in both hands at the edge of something enormous. The army behind you has thought about this cup with a seriousness it gives ammunition. American forces requisition coffee by the £100 million. The quartermasters roast and grind on an industrial scale and buy up instant production entire. When the Nestle company had launched its new Nescafé powder in 1938, it could not have known that within 6 years the output of its American plants would be going, effectively wholesale, to the military. Coffee is in the K ration, the C ration, the 10-in-1, the mess tent, the Red Cross canteen, the donut wagon. The Navy's carriers brew it around the clock. The bomber crews carry it in vacuum jugs over Germany at altitudes where it steams like a locomotive. Nobody calls it a weapon out loud. Everybody treats it like one. And back home, here's the mirror, and it's the last piece of the machine, so watch it turn. In November of 1942, with U-boats sinking freighters faster than yards could build them and shipping space worth blood, the government began rationing coffee on the home front. £1 per person, over 15 years of age, every 5 weeks. Work that out in cups a day and it lands near a single cup, for a nation running on 3. The grumbling was epic, presidential even. And the telling detail is what happened next. Coffee was the first major ration food to be freed at the end of July 1943, months before meat, before sugar, before butter, because Washington understood with perfect clarity which shortages a warring democracy could stand and which it could not. Think about what that means in the long arithmetic of our night. In 1773, the government in London learned that Americans would start down the road to war over a tax on their drink. In 1943, the government in Washington concluded that the same people could not safely be asked to go short of their other drink, even while fighting the largest war in human history. Same nation, different cup. That's the whole story of tonight, told twice by 2 governments, 170 years apart. The war ends. You come home from it. You, the boy from the hedgerow, down a gangplank in New York in 1945, into a country that is about to be richer than any country has ever been. And in 1946, with the boys home and the pot never off the burner, American coffee drinking hits the highest level ever recorded. Before or since, the customs and trade figures put it near 20 pounds of coffee per person per year, man, woman and child, roughly double what the country drinks in my time. 1946 is the summit of the mountain we've been climbing all night, from the girls' third brew kitchen tea to this, a nation of veterans 3 wars deep, drinking coffee at every diner counter from here to the Pacific, bottomless cup, nickel refill, cream in a little steel pitcher. And the 20th century keeps sealing the lid. In the early 1950s, the phrase coffee break enters the language. Pushed hard, it's documented by a coffee industry ad campaign. But it stuck because the factories and offices had already built the pause into the shift. The diner, the percolator on the stove, the office urn, the thermos in the lunch pail. By mid-century, coffee isn't a choice Americans make. It's the water American life swims in. And tea? Let me close tea's account honestly, because it deserves honesty. It did nothing wrong, remember, except stand too close to an empire. Tea in America survived by turning into things the parlor would never have recognized. It was Americans, largely, who gave the world iced tea, the sweet cold ocean of it the South drinks to this day. And it was a New York tea merchant's customers, right at the century's start, who popularized brewing from the little sample bags his tea came in, and thereby the tea bag. Tea in America lives on as sweetness, as convenience, as comfort, a fine and pleasant life, and a small one. Roughly £1 a head, 1/5 of an ounce here and there, while its rival ships fill the harbours. In Britain, meanwhile, the leaf never lost the throne. The empire that kept the tea kept the habit, rationed it through the Blitz, and clung to it like a handrail. And to this day the two nations sit on either side of the Atlantic, each holding its cup, each finding the other's cup faintly hilarious. Both cups came out of the same quarrel. They are the two halves of a broken thing, still fitting each other perfectly along the crack. So gather it up now, the whole answer, the thing the title promised. Why do Americans drink coffee instead of tea? And what did a war have to do with it? 3 wars. Count them on your fingers in the dark, slowly, the way we counted the gears. The revolution lit it. A tax of 3p kept purely on principle. A December night in 1773, when 90,000 pounds of tea went into a cold harbour in near silence. A decade in which drinking the leaf became an act with a flag on it, and a stout lawyer wrote to his wife, "Tea must be universally renounced. I must be weaned. The first war is the hinge. Without it, none of the rest." It broke tea's crown and put the rival inside the door. But a rebellion alone makes a gesture, not a habit, and gestures fade. The young republic's tariffs and Brazil's cheap near bean turned the gesture into arithmetic. Then the Civil War drilled it. £36 a year in every Union haversack. The growl of rifle butts at dawn. A future president with a dipper under fire at Antietam. 2 million men coming home wired twice a day to the taste of survival, and every kitchen in the country relearning breakfast to match. This second war turned arithmetic into reflex, and the Second World War sealed it. Instant powder in every ration. A cup of joe in every theatre of a planet-sized war. a home front that could bear the rationing of meat but not of coffee, and a summit in 1946 that no year since has touched. The Third War turned reflex into identity, poured it into the diners and the office urns and the thermoses, and screwed the lid down on the century. Rebellion, then reinforcement, then ratification. One war to break the old habit, two more to teach the new one, each war reteaching the American morning until the morning forgot it had ever been taught. That's the honest answer, and you'll notice what it isn't. It isn't taste. Nobody ever held a national referendum on flavour. Nations don't choose their drinks the way a customer chooses at a counter. They drink what their history leaves in the cup. And America's history, 3 times over, left coffee. Before we bank the fires for good, let me rake through the embers one last slow time. Because on this channel, the record gets the last word, and the record, for once, is full of gentle endings. The real people of tonight, the documented ones, the us with names, let's see them all home. John Adams kept his promise. The man who wrote I must be weaned stayed weaned, more or less, for half a century. Through the Congress, through the war, through embassies in the tea-drinking capitals of Europe, through the vice presidency and the presidency itself. The letter he wrote Abigail on the 6th of July, 1774, sits today in the Adams family papers at the Massachusetts Historical Society, where you can read his actual pen strokes forming the actual words, the ink a little browned, the argument still warm. He died on the 4th of July, 1826, the 50th anniversary of the Declaration, to the day, within hours of Jefferson, a coincidence so operatic that the young country took it for a sign, and honestly, who could blame it? The men with the hatchets kept their secret, and this is one of my favourite quiet facts in all of American history. For 50 years, almost nobody talked. No memoirs, no toasts, no names. Partly fear of British law at first, then habit, then a kind of vow grown over with age. The event didn't even have its famous name for 2 full generations. The newspapers and the histories called it the destruction of the tea, flat as a customs form, and the phrase Boston Tea Party doesn't show up in print until the 1830s, coined in effect by the grandchildren. It was only then, when the last participants were very old men, that the country realized it was about to lose them, and came running with notebooks. A poor Boston-born shoemaker named George Robert Twelves Hughes, 90-something, cheerful, needle-sharp, became a national relic in his last years. 2 whole books were taken down from his recollections in the 1830s, and he was feted at 4th of July celebrations as one of the last of the Mohawks. A shoemaker, celebrated at last at 90 for 3 hours' work one December night at 16. The record keeps whom it pleases. Once in a while it pleases the record to keep a shoemaker. The tea itself washed the shores of Boston Harbour for weeks. Windrows of it on the Dorchester Flats, exactly where the tide argued it should go, and townsmen turned out with rakes to beat it into the mud so no one could dry and drink it. And some of it, wonderfully, still exists. Museums in Boston and beyond hold little glass vials of blackened leaf, gathered, so the family traditions attached to them say, and I flag them as traditions, from the shoes of participants, or scooped from the shoreline that winter, corked, labelled, and handed down for 200 years like saints' bones. The most famous empty of all the empties, one of the tea chests itself, surfaced again in the 20th century and sits in a museum by the harbour, where every 16th of December to this day Boston reenacts the whole night, Meeting, march, splash. And the crowd, I'm told, still goes strangely quiet at the water's edge. Some instincts transmit, and one small correction the language owes those silent men. The word for what they and their committees invented, the organised refusal, the printed names, the virtue made cheaper than the alternative, didn't exist yet. English wouldn't get the word boycott until 1880, when the Irish Land League turned collective refusal on a County Mayo land agent named Captain Charles Boycott, and his surname fell off him and into the dictionary inside a single newspaper season. Which means Americans practiced the thing for 100 years before anyone had the word. That happens more than you'd think. The deed usually ships before the label. Sergeant McKinley's coffee wagon rolled all the way to the White House. William McKinley of the 23rd Ohio came out of the war a brevet major, went home, went to Congress, and in 1896 became the 25th President of the United States. And after his death, the veterans of his old brigade raised the monument I promised you, dedicated at Antietam in 1903, a tall granite marker whose bronze relief shows, in solemn official commemoration, a young sergeant handing coffee to soldiers. It stands there now near the Burnside Bridge. Park rangers point it out with a smile they've earned, the only monument on any American battlefield so far as anyone can determine to the serving of a hot beverage under fire. John Arbuckle died in 1912, by then one of the great importers of the age, his Brooklyn waterfront works taking in coffee by the shipload, and, in his last years, running a fleet of his own and giving away fortunes to charity with the same systematic energy he'd once applied to egg glaze. The peppermint sticks and the clip-out signatures had furnished half the frontier by the time Ariosa faded. Collectors still trade the old yellow wrappers, angel and all. Joel Cheek sold the Maxwell House business in a 1928 merger for a sum the Nashville papers could barely typeset. Tens of millions in 1928 dollars. And the slogan he probably didn't get from Theodore Roosevelt is still printed on cans you can buy tomorrow morning. The legend long ago stopped needing to be true. Advertising is the one afterlife that requires no documentation, and Josephus Daniels, the man who dried out the Navy and maybe probably not named the cup, lived until 1948, long enough to serve as ambassador to Mexico under his own former assistant secretary, Franklin Roosevelt. Long enough to watch the fleet he'd once ordered sober fight the greatest naval war in history. On coffee, around the clock, a cup of joe in every wardroom of a two-ocean navy. If the sailor's nickname really was Revenge, then rarely has revenge ended up so thoroughly on the house. As for the two drinks themselves, they're both still here, and the ledger between them has grown almost friendly. Somewhere out in your century, the old rivalry has softened into commerce and choice. Espresso machines in Boston, bubble tea in Dallas, and nobody's name printed in any newspaper as an enemy of liberty for choosing either. It took 250 years, but the cup finally went back to being just a cup. Almost. Ask an American to picture a tea drinker and see what century they reach for. Verdicts fade slower than laws. That's the record then. Every name walked home, every legend flagged, every vial corked. And now the fires are banked, and the long question is answered, and there's nothing left of tonight but the putting away. So let's put it all away together, slowly, the way a kitchen is closed for the night. One shelf at a time, no hurry at all. Put away the boy from Brooklyn first since we saw him last. He makes it home. We said so, and we keep our word on this channel. Give him 60 more years of percolators and diner counters, a wife who takes hers with too much sugar, a garage where a Coleman stove sits on a shelf he never quite empties. Some mornings, deep in his 80s, The smell of coffee coming to a boil somewhere will make him stand very still for a moment with his hand on a door frame, and his granddaughter will ask if he's all right, and he'll say yes. And he will be. That's what the cup was for. Put away the louse from the Texas Trail. He gets his own outfit eventually, or a hardware store in Abilene, or a small ranch with a bad well and a good view. The record loses him the way the record loses almost everyone. And whoever he was, and he was hundreds, the story closes gently over him too. Somewhere among his effects, decades on, a little drift of clipped signatures. Arbuckle Brothers, Arbuckle Brothers. Saved towards something he either got or stopped needing. Both endings are fine. Sleep doesn't require us to know. Put away the soldier from Ohio and his schoolteacher friend who counted things. Both of them. Grey men at Grand Army reunions, drinking coffee in fellowship halls with the others who knew what the growl of a rifle butt at dawn once meant. Put away his mother, who learned to make it his way, which is the quietest act of love in this whole night, and I'd set it beside anything at Antietam. Put away the grocer's boy from Front Street, and his Friday evening roasting wife, and the grocer with his ledger heart and his one true sentence. The docks are the country now. He was right for a century, and being right for a century is more than most sentences get. And last, put away the girl, the one we started with, the one whose name the record never kept. 14 years old, 31 steps, 3 old burn scars like little fish, 3rd brew tea in a cracked bowl, 10 seconds of stolen smell in a grey November doorway. She saw everything first and understood none of it, and carried all of it, which is the usual arrangement history makes with girls like her. She got her 2 rooms and her Cooper and her little iron mill that growled like a dreaming dog. Let her keep them forever. As for the cracked cup, the blue and white one, the fishman on his bridge, grandmother's cup with the crack turned toward the wall, I can't tell you where it ended, because it was 10,000 cups in 10,000 cabinets, which is exactly why I can tell you where it ended. It's still there. In your family too, most likely. Some shelf, some box, some hutch in a hallway, a cup or a saucer or a teapot too good to use, from a country and a habit that dissolved out from under it. Nobody drinks from it. Nobody throws it away. That's not indecision. That's what reverence looks like after 200 years. The empire sank, the cup floats. The cup always outlives the empire. That may be the only reliable law this whole night has proven. And here is the last connection, the one that runs from all of them to you, lying where you're lying now. Tomorrow morning, not now but tomorrow, when this rest is finished with you, somewhere in your home a small machine or a kettle or a pot will make a familiar sound, and a dark smell with edges will walk down a hallway, and you will hold something warm in both hands before you're fully anyone yet. And now you know what you'll be holding, a tax of 3p, a silent crowd in the rain at Griffin's Wharf, a lawyer's letter promising to be weaned, a dipper at Antietam, a peppermint stick on a Texas plain, an envelope of powder in a Norman hedgerow, 170 years of other people's mornings, all of them finished now, all of them folded down into one ordinary cup that asks nothing of you at all except to be held. Every cup is history you can drink. You've been drinking it all your life, but that's tomorrow. Tomorrow there will be the kettle and the pot and the first cup. Tomorrow there will be the small machines and their small sounds. Tomorrow can boil its own water. Right now there is just this, the bed, the dark, the weight of the blankets, this voice growing slower, and you. And you've done enough tonight. You crossed 170 years. You stood at the wall with a wrapped kettle. You walked downhill to the sea in a silent crowd. You ground the beans, held the herd, held the line, held the cup. That's a full night's work by anybody's ledger, and the ledger is closed now, and it balances. So let yourself be poured out slowly, the way the last of the pot is poured. No hurry, nothing wasted, down to the quiet at the bottom. You're warm enough, you're safe enough, you're tired enough. The good tired, the earned kind, the kind the girl felt on her straw pallet behind the kitchen door when the fire was banked and the house above her finally went still. She had the warmth of the coals and the whole night ahead of her, and no one would call for the kettle until dawn, and that was enough. It's enough for you too. Warm enough, safe enough, tired enough. That's all sleep has ever asked anyone to bring. Listen to how quiet it's gotten. The hatchets are quiet. The harbour is quiet. The tea long since carried out on 200 years of tides. The rifle butts are quiet. The growl finished. The little fires down to embers all across Maryland. The longhorns are bedded down and the nighthawk is humming to them. Lo, the way you hum to anything huge to keep it dreaming. The foxholes are empty and grown over with hedgerow, and green things use them now for exactly what a sleeping man once used them for. Staying low, staying still, staying safe until morning. Every fire in this story has been banked. Every cup has been rinsed and turned down on the board. Everyone in it. The girl, the boy, the soldier, the louse, the rifleman, cook and the grocer and cookie, and the mistress with her key. Every one of them finished their last cup and lay down in their sentry in their bed exactly as you are lying now. They were all tired too. That's the secret of the whole story. Under the wars and the tariffs and the brands, it was always just tired people reaching for a little warmth to get them through the next required thing. And every night when the warmth was done being needed, they set it down and slept. Centuries will pass. They passed tonight. You felt them go. The kitchens you heard about will change beyond recognition and then change again. The harbours will fill and empty. The brands will merge and vanish. The slogans will be forgotten by the grandchildren of the people who wrote them. And someday, in fairness, some other drink may do to coffee what coffee did to tea. Habits are only wars nobody remembers, and there are always more wars and more forgetting. But people will still wake in the dark, still reach for something hot to hold in both hands, still stand a moment at a window with a warm cup, watching the light come before the day starts asking. Some things don't change, the cup changes. The holding doesn't. The holding never changes. And your own morning, when it comes, will be the same as theirs. The same as the girl's, kneeling at the coals with her numb feet and her kettle, the first one awake, the house heavy and silent above her. The same as the soldiers, sitting up in wet grass into the growl of 1,000 grinders, one more dawn paid for and delivered. The same as the louses blowing on the embers under a black iron pot while the stars go out one shelf at a time over Texas. The same as all the morning stretching back down the long stairway of this story, step by step by step, each one warmer than the night it ended. Morning has been arriving like that, on schedule, with something hot at the bottom of it, for as long as anyone has bothered to write things down. It will arrive like that tomorrow. It does not need your help to do it. Nothing left in this story needs your help now. That's what the end of a story is. The moment when everyone in it can finally manage without you. So set it all down, the way you'd set down a full tray at the end of a long shift. Carefully, gratefully, done. Set down the dates, they'll keep. 3pence, 1773, 1862, 1946. Numbers hold their shape in the dark better than almost anything. They'll be exactly where you left them in the morning. Set down the names. They were never yours to carry past tonight. Set down the harbour and the hedgerow and the trail, the wharf and the counter and the wall by the parlour door. Fold them the way the mistress folded flannel around porcelain, soft, snug, one wrap, another, and lay them in the chest, and let the little brass click of the lock be the softest sound you've heard all night. Nothing in that chest is lost. Locked away is not gone. You learn that tonight too. Everything put away with care is only waiting, patient as a cup at the back of a cabinet for some morning that wants it again. So let it come now. Let sleep take you the way the tide took the tea, quietly, completely, out beyond argument. Let the harbour smooth over. Let the fires go grey. Let the growl of every grinder in 170 years wind down, slower, slower, to a last soft click. Let your hands, which have held so many borrowed cups tonight, open and be empty and be still. Let your thoughts settle like grounds in a quiet pot, drifting down and staying down. You've earned this rest. 3 wars' worth, a whole country's worth of mornings, and not one of them yours to make until tomorrow. Take it, and dream of whatever dreams may come. A bridge, a fisherman, a bird, painted in blue on the inside of sleep, worn smooth by every thumb that ever held on. Good night.